So right now, the current state of book banning is what we're seeing is it's spread. Initially, it started in Texas and has spread out through Louisiana, Florida, now even in Utah, where we're seeing even the state telling students that they can't even bring a book that they personally own to school, that if it's banned in their schools. So Matt Krause was a Texas representative at the time, part of the education committee, and he decided to send a list of 850 titles, essentially out of his reach or scope of his duties. But he did send that list out to every school district in Texas, asking them to remove the titles if they own them, titles like work from Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, and even a database about health. So basically trying to restrict titles, and we don't know where that list came from, but just a randomly generated list of just all kinds of titles.
Well, it's very hard for me to get into the mind of those who are pursuing this so vigorously. And I would love to defer to the librarians who have they're so well versed in this opposition, but I sometimes feel as if it's fear of children having information that might be counter to a home's ideology, religion, political point of view. And when young people have information, they might ask questions, and that might be counter, and it might feel as if there is conflict, when in fact it's really just healthy curiosity about subjects, people, religions, culture that is unfamiliar. And I think what it feels like, why it feels so viral, that it's, in places like New Jersey, is that it has a sort of insidious nature. And what it does quietly is generates lists, et cetera. But what it also does is the human part of it is very serious, the safety and well-being of these librarians who are pursuing the idea of education, the gateway to information and curiosity. For anybody to step in the way of the opportunity to learn is really tragic. The consequences of them trying to protect that is incredibly serious. And I think one of the things we want to try to communicate is the danger in which these librarians are finding themselves unnecessarily, that with conversation and a quiet, calm environment in which people listen to each other, things could be radically different. And children could be companions to parents instead of potentially, creating a wedge in homes, but also keeping people from information, that would be appropriately served up.
I'm from a very small town in Louisiana, and I can't even go out grocery shopping in my town. I've received death threats for the crime of giving a speech at the public library about how libraries are for everyone. And it's not just an attack on librarians, but it's an attack on the books, but they're also trying to devalue and defund libraries as a whole across the board, public libraries and school libraries, devalue the profession. And we're seeing sweeping legislation also to help these efforts with book banning and devaluing libraries in our profession.
There is a long history in this country of banning books. It's so curious, and we were just talking about this in another interview, how books, the printed word on paper, feels so absolutely terrifying and getting in the way of a child's safety. But the internet is perfectly all right. One of our librarians in a previous interview talked about the care and attention and vigilance with which an author writes a young adult book, that they understand they're hoping to tackle a complicated, complex issue. There's a variety of things that are complicated and complex, right? And how thoughtful they are, and that they're always friendly characters, and there's always balance, and there's always somebody talking about what makes these challenging, these issues, right? The internet is not interested in any of that, so they have access to far more without the diligence and intellect and compassion of an author. So I really feel like the focus is in the wrong place. It's impossible to understand why a book is so threatening when you can simply have the conversation with your child about it. This is why it scares me for you to have this book. Ms. or Mr. Librarian, this is why I feel nervous. Is there a way we can talk about this before my child checks it out? My child checked this out. I don't like it. It's counter to my religion, my politics. Like there's a million ways that we can do this without threatening the lives of our librarians sincerely and taking away something for a child that could change their life and keep them safe. And this is not just school libraries anymore. These are public libraries. These are the places that I was raised. I'm one of 8 kids. If I did not have access to a library, I don't know where I would be today. And it's shelter for them. We forget that too. It's warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and there is always somebody there for them. Always. It doesn't matter what's happening at home or in their communities. There is somebody at a library to direct them toward information, to enrich and foster their curiosity, to let them understand compassion. Like, it's a disgrace that we're not having conversations, that we're simply threatening people. Sorry.
And I was just going to add that the politicization of this, what I find so disturbing is this constant use of the word indoctrination. And, I always say it's about representation. This is not about indoctrination. This is about our expert, trained librarians who get master's degrees to determine these things, to know how to build a library and to have a collection that is representative of
Well, and I want to add too, so I grew up in South Texas. My parents only had an 8th grade education, and so school was very important. They took me to libraries because I didn't have a lot of books in my home either. And back then, the books I was reading were by Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie, which I love. Now we know there's even more films. But the thing that is different is that there was nothing that I saw in those books, whether it was that or Trumpet of the Swan or maybe a book by Judy Blume, that represented me as a Hispanic. I was never going to see Sugar Snow in South Texas, So reading books helped take me to places. And what I love that's happening now in publishing is that, like you said, with the representation, I can see myself, and children, young adults can see their lived experiences in books. And the last thing I want to add too is that people forget that a library is a place of voluntary inquiry. Nobody is ever forced to check out a book, whether you're in a school library or a public library. And so the fact that you mentioned about there's one or small group of people trying to restrict access, we're not talking about the parents that don't even get a say because they want their way. So we are really focused around trying to remind people that everyone deserves access, and that if you don't want that book for your reader, perfectly fine. But to restrict it from others is not okay.
Well, and every student in a school library and every patron in a public library deserves to have themselves and their families represented on the shelves. And when you start banning books or censoring books, and we see that the majority are books with characters from the LGBTQ plus community, you're telling them that their stories don't matter, and in a sense, they don't matter. And that to me is wrong. So that's why I think it's important to speak out. I would never want a student or anyone in my community to think that that they don't deserve to be there and that their stories don't deserve to be heard.
And they're some of our most vulnerable readers. And so to be able to see themselves within a page of a book, to know that whether what they're feeling or the questions they have are there to be answered. Like you said, they may question, they may be angry, they may be sad, but why is it so harmful that a book causes you to be a thinker? Because, nobody's going to force you how to think, but, on the same page, just the fact that it's opening some ideas to a reader, I think is critical.
And to Sarah Jessica's point, I think part of the film and what we want the public to understand is there has been a protocol in place of how to work these things out between librarians and parents. That has existed. There are book challenges. That is not new. What is happening now is brazen breaking of protocol that has never been seen like this, on a scope that has never been seen like this.
Circumventing process.
Yeah, that is the new piece. It's like, it's not new to us. Judy Blume, all these books that it was like, ooh, we don't have access to it. This is a level that we just have not seen before.
We're very excited to be partnering with PBS and Independent Lens. They have a built-in network of over 150 libraries. We're partnering on an impact campaign with PEN America, and a lot of their courageous authors who've been affected with these banned books. And also CAA Foundation is going to become involved to really do a tour and get this out as widely as we can.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks so much.